Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second in our series of A-Level Sociology Revision Blasts. My name's Jim. I'm in the background here. Let's go over to Team Sociology's studio. And we've got Craig's with us today, the sociology guy.
Hi.
And of course, Duncan. Give us a wave, Dunks.
Hello. Hello.
Duncan, before we get going, as people are joining us in the chat window, could you just give us a quick overview as to how this works, how you'd like the session to work, the use of chat window and that kind of stuff. And then when you're ready, just give me the nod and we'll make a start.
Great. Yeah, we'll do. So we're going to have a lot of quick fire activities. In each activity, there'll be an opportunity for you to suggest some answers. You can do that in the chat window. So some of the time it'll be multiple choice questions. So the answer might be A, B, C, or D. Other times you might need to type in an answer. We'll give you some hints and clues where needed. We can see your comments. So we're, if you've got any questions, put them in there and hopefully we'll see them and answer. And also we can see if you haven't quite got the idea of what the activity is, and we can respond to that. So I think we'll get going now, Jim. Okay. So we start with some multiple choice questions. Just a few of these just to get you going. So which of these methods would be considered to produce the most valid data? Okay, so just type in A, B, C, or D into the chat window just to get going. So is it unstructured interview, laboratory experiment, closed questionnaire, or official statistics? Which one would you think would be the most valid? Or lots of answers coming in and lots of correct answers too. Let's have a look. It was unstructured interview, so well done with that. Very good. If you weren't sure, just make sure you know the difference between validity and reliability. Those are the ones that you need to make sure you understand the difference. Okay, next one. We've got which of these methods is most likely to produce quantitative data? Is it historical documents, semi-structured interview, participant observation, or questionnaires? So A, B, C, or D. Which one's most likely to produce quantitative data? Let's see them. Got some answers. Lots coming in. Lots of D's coming in. And questionnaires. Well done. Let's have a look. Is that correct? It is. Well done. Lots of really good answers there. Someone posted her up. Could you just quickly explain the difference between reliability and validity? It's one of those things that if you do it quickly, there's always a danger that you kind of don't do it quite justice. But reliability is where if you use that same method again, providing nothing else had changed, you get the same result. Could you repeat the research? So it tends to be quantitative type data that tends to lend itself to being more reliable. And valid, is it you're getting a true picture? Is it really what you want to see? Are you seeing the reality? And that tends to be more with qualitative data. Okay, next one. Which of these methods produces primary data? Historical documents, personal documents, official statistics, or non-participant observation? Okay, lots of answers. Lots of answers coming in. Bit of mixture. Got a bit of a mixture there. When we talk about personal documents, it's things like letters and diaries. So if that might help with some of you. Primary data is data that you've produced yourself. The researchers produce themselves in their research. So those of you going for D, non-participant observation, they're the correct ones. So personal documents, things like letters and diaries, they already exist. The researcher isn't generating that research themselves. Okay, so those are the MCQs to get us started. We've now got something called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'll hand over to Craig.
Thanks, Duncan. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is one of my kind of favorite knowledge retrieval activities for when you're doing your revision. In a moment, you're going to see a screen and it will ask you to identify 5 of something, 4 of something, 3 of something, and so on and so forth. When we switch over the screen, you'll hear about 2 minutes of music from our house band, which includes Duncan on keyboards. And so if we can go to it now, and let's see, it's all about research methods. So what we need is, I want you to identify 5 methods preferred by interpretivists, 4 methods by positivists, 3 sampling methods, 2 different types of data collected, and 1 variable that is used in an experiment. Let's see some answers coming up.
Okay, so type your suggestions into the window. Choose any of them.
Observations I'm seeing. What type of observations?
You might need to say whether it's for the 5, the 4, the 3, or the 2, or the 1 when you put up your suggestions. So
we've got somebody here, 5 unstructured interviews. Yeah. Unstructured interviews, open questionnaires, interviews. What's the question? The question is, you need to identify 5 methods by interpretativists, 4 methods by positivists, identify 3 sampling methods, 2 types of data, or 1 variable used in experiment. Okay, so lots of people are saying questionnaires. What type of questionnaires?
And which one's it for?
Unstructured interviews. And which one's it for? Yeah. Covert methods.
I saw random sampling for one of the sampling methods there. Very good.
Yeah, it's coming through. Covert observation. Okay. Structured interviews, lab experiments. Good. Quantitative and qualitative data collected. Good. Stratified sampling, stratified random quota. Snowball sampling. Some good answers there. Has anybody got the variable used in experiments yet? Volunteer sampling.
5, 4, 3.
Oh, we're coming to the end.
2, 1.
Yes, I am going to go through the answers. Just to answer that question there. Okay, so some 5 methods. Now, you may have more than these. These are just the 5 that I picked out. Unstructured interviews, of course, is preferred by interpretativists. Participant observations, they could be overt or covert. Personal documents, historical documents, and open questionnaires. Okay, can we move on to our next one? Thank you. Closed questionnaires, official statistics, structured interviews, and lab experiments preferred by positivists. Our next slide. Stratified, random, and snowball. We did have a couple of people say quota sampling as well, which should be correct. Volunteer sampling as well. Opportunity sampling, I think I saw as well. Yep. So 2. Onto slide 2, please. Quantitative and qualitative. I would have taken primary or secondary for that. Would you, Duncan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there you go. And our final one variable that's used in experiments. The independent variable, you could have put the dependent variable as well. You could talk about sort of like extraneous variables, even though it's sort of like they're not really used in experiments. We try to control those. Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lots of good answers there. And we'll move on to Duncan for our next activity.
Okay, so what's going to happen here is some clues are going to come up towards a research method. The first one will come up. The idea is see how quickly you can get it. It might be that you change your mind as the clues come up, because the first 1 or 2, it could be more than one possible method. And then as it narrows down, it's likely to become clear which method it is. Let's see how you do. So the first clue is it produces qualitative data. So we've already seen that that's quite a lot of options there. But you might want to put in some guesses in the chat window if you like.
It'd be good to see if anybody could get it after 1 clue.
It would be pretty impressive, wouldn't it? See one suggestion there. If anyone gets it after 1 clue, obviously that is largely luck. But shall we see what the second clue is? It is a primary source of data. Okay, not sure if that's helped us a lot more. Some suggestions coming up. Good suggestions coming up. Okay. Yeah, that is popular. Also some observations there. Yeah, we've seen certain types of observations. Good stuff. Let's see the next one. It can be participant or non-participant. Oh, right. Well, that's probably pushed us towards a particular type of method, but we still might need to be more specific. Okay, so people are now seeing a lot of observations coming into the window now, but what type? Okay, next one. The Hawthorne effect is a likely limitation. Okay, now that ought to probably get it. So I should see a lot of people getting it at this point, I'd like to think. Which type of observation is more likely to be affected by the Hawthorne effect? Yeah, I'm starting to see some correct answers coming through now. And the last one does not require deception. Some others coming through now. Got a mixture of overt and covert observations, but I think I'm seeing more overt now. And the answer is overt observation. Okay, because you don't need to deceive anyone. If you mix up your overt and your covert, you're undercover. Okay, overt you're open. So if you can remember that. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. Okay, so the first clue is it involves a number of questions being asked and answered. Okay, now that's still quite a few possibilities there, aren't there? It involves a number of questions being asked and answered, but let's see what you come up with. Yeah, we've seen interviews and questionnaires. Yeah, it's likely to be one of those, but it might be a particular type. Let's see, next one. It could include a mixture of closed and open questions. Okay, has that changed anyone's mind? Still be both, couldn't it? Okay, next one. The researcher is present and questions are answered verbally. Okay, I'm seeing structured interviews, seeing unstructured interviews, semi-structured interview. Okay, I will let you know that someone at least has got the right answer. Let's see the next one. Quite a lot of right answers now. The researcher has a list of questions. Okay. Now, loads of people going for structured interviews now because of the list of questions, but I may have made it awkward with the last one. Let's have a look. The researcher is not bound by that list and can probe further if they wish. So let's see people's final suggestions in the chat window before we reveal the answer. Lots of people going for semi-structured interview, and it is correct. Well done, semi-structured. So an unstructured, you wouldn't have a list of questions at all. You might have topics, whatever, but semi-structured, you do have the list of questions, but you can deviate from it if you want to. Okay, one more of these. And this one is a tricky one. I've put this one in, so don't put this one in to be tricky. So don't worry if you're not, don't get this one. First clue, it produces quantitative data. So lots of possible things. Okay, next one. It is a method often used by those researching the media. Okay, so a method that might be used to research the media that produces quantitative data. Okay, people going for questionnaires, official statistics. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. For example, the Glasgow University Media Group used it alongside other methods. Now, those of you who do media will have come across that, but some of the rest of you might have done in research methods as well, particularly if you're talking about this particular type of method. And I'm giving a clue here that it's not one of your kind of more standard methods. Oh, I've seen a correct answer, a couple of correct answers. Very, very good. Next one. Though generating their own data, they did so using secondary sources. Okay, someone's asking, who is the Glasgow University Media Group? It's a group that studies newspapers and television news and things like that. They wrote books like Bad News and More Bad News. Okay, seeing a few more of the correct answers. Let's have one more clue. Those secondary sources tend to be qualitative in nature. So they're using secondary qualitative sources to produce primary quantitative data. Oh, I saw a brilliant word there, triangulation, which is brilliant, and that might come up later. But the people who are giving lots of right answers is content analysis, and I did see a lot of right answers there. Well done. Yeah, so that's producing quantitative data out of qualitative data. So perhaps, for example, counting the amount of times a particular word's been used or something like that. Okay, so those are all our big reveals. I'm going to hand back to Craig now for a connection wall.
Okay, thanks, Duncan. What you'll see on the screen in front of you are 16 considerations that researchers have to take into account when they are conducting research. What I would like you to do is to organize them into 4 categories, and in each category, place 4 of those terms. So it might be worthwhile to try and identify the 4 different categories first of all, and then organize those considerations into them. If you just place the 4 different categories, the 4 different groups of phrases in the chat box, and you start putting those in, and then start to identify which of those issues belong to which category. So I can see some people putting up practical issues and ethical issues. Which of those are practical which of those are practical issues and which of those are ethical issues? PET, yep. Seeing some. One group is ethics, yep.
So which 4 would be to do with ethics then? Which 4 would be to do with practicality, if those are right?
That's right. So which 4 of those would fall into? So we've got informed consent, deception, confidentiality, ethical issues. There's a 4th one in there. What's the 4th one that we'd want? Confidentiality, protection from harm, informed consent, deception, or ethical issues. Good.
Yeah, well done. So we've got 1 set, maybe.
We've got practical issues, time, access to participants, research interests. Any others in there?
What else might be practical?
PET is practical, ethical, and theoretical issues that researchers have to take into account. So we've got practical, time, access to participants, personal characteristics of researcher, and opportunity to conduct research. That is correct. So if we move to the next one, I think practical was the first one. If we move to the next slide, there you go. So time, access to participants, opportunity to conduct research, and the personal characteristics of the researcher. These are all logistical considerations that the researcher has to take into account. Ethical, I think we've identified all of the ethical ones as well: informed consent, confidentiality, deception, and protection from harm. So we could move on to our next slide. Okay, so people are saying theoretical. So what might be the theoretical issues out of those 8 that are remaining?
And what might be the other?
And what might be the other category, of course. So theoretical: objectivity, validity, reliability, preferred methodology. Validity, reliability, objectivity, reliability, validity, and objectivity. Theoretical issues. I think we've got most of those theoretical issues there. So if we can move on to our next slide. They were objectivity, validity, reliability, type of data collected, whether that's quantitative data or qualitative data. What could be the other category then? We have 4 remaining. What could the other category be? Methodological preference is the preference of the research for what methods they choose to use. Just answering someone's question there. Anybody, any ideas of what the final category could be? No, not practicality, external factors, no.
Sociology skills is close, isn't it? That's probably the
Close,
closest so far.
very close. Yeah. Somebody always has to write pervert, don't they? It's a very thing. Okay, if we move on.
Anyone who doesn't know why will be very confused now.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, most sociologists know about pervert. If we move on to to the final one, it was the sociologist's values. So things like their career and how that might influence what research they pick, their theoretical preference, are they a Marxist, functionalist, feminist, so on, how that impacts on their research, their preferred methodologies, what type of methods they like to use, and their own personal research interests would be influenced by their values. So these are some of the key kind of considerations you have to take into account when you're thinking about sociological research. Duncan, over to you.
Absolutely. Okay, we've got something called the 60-second challenge now. So what we have on the screen is you have A to H, a list of research methods, and 1 to 8, some studies that that have been carried out, sociological studies that you may have encountered, and don't worry if you haven't, incidentally. As a couple of people saying they can't see the words clearly. Hopefully most people can. If you might be able to maximize the image or whatever. Okay, so what you're wanting to try and do in the 60 seconds is try and work out which of those methods were used for which of those studies. If you don't know the study, you might be able to try and work it out, process of elimination from the ones that you do know. If you know the names but don't know the name of the study, it is likely that the study I've listed is the one that you know them for. So for example, Willis learning to labour, that is the LAD study. So if you like are familiar with Rosenthal and Jacobson or Willis or Chubb and Moe, but you don't know the name of their study, then it's likely to be the study that you're familiar with. I can see some people are already going for it, so let's get the 60 seconds going. Okay. Okay, 60 seconds goes very fast, doesn't it? Seen lots of answers in there, some of which are right. I've seen some right answers and some good guesses as well. It's worth having some examples of each of the research methods you might be asked of. It might well be that you have some other examples, not the ones that we've got listed here, and that's fine as well. Shall we have a look at them, see what they were? Okay. So you can see them there, and I saw some of you get some of those right. So Wilmot and Young use social surveys, questionnaires. Dobash and Dobash use unstructured interviews. Often a lot of feminist research tends to use interviews for a variety of reasons that you can look into. Patrick, covert participant observation, is a good example to use there. Quite often people think Venkatesh was covert, but it was actually overt, if you know that study. Rosenthal and Jacobson's obviously self-fulfilling prophecy. That's a field experiment. Chubb and Moe used exam results, so official statistics. Willis used a number of methods, case study. And Laslett, if you know that one, and don't worry if you don't, was historical documents. He was looking at forms of family before industrialization, so it's kind of a families and households type research, but it's one that sometimes people use for historical documents. How many studies do you think we need to know for each research method? I'm asked there. Well, what you want is ones that will illustrate a particular point about it, really. So, for example, the Patrick Glasgow gang observed, his real name wasn't James Patrick. He published the research under an assumed name because he was frightened of reprisals from the gang. So that's quite a useful one to give about the difficulty of getting out when you've been undercover and that kind of thing. So there isn't like a definite number you need, but if there are a few points that you want to, you want to try and illustrate, then it's good to have a study that illustrates that point. What was Venkatesh's study about? Luke's asked. That's also about gangs. It was about gangs in Chicago. Okay, so you might encounter it in crime and deviance or just as a research method example, and someone else has answered there in the audience in the chat window, which is really good. Okay, so if any of those you're not sure about, you can always have a look back and look through your notes and see what they did. But as I say, if you've got other examples for the research methods, that's fine too. It might well be that you're doing a topic like health or something like that, and you know some research methods from your optional topic. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Craig now for a bubble quiz.
Okay, thank you, Duncan. The bubble quiz is where we will ask you a question. All these questions are about limitations of different research methods. Now, the number of answers that are correct in here are between 0 and 4. So you're not just looking for one correct answer. There could be anywhere between no correct answers and 4 correct answers. So let's look at our first question. So which of the following are limitations of using official statistics? Is it A, they can be manipulated, B, the definition can change, C, they lack validity, or D, they lack reliability? Which one of those or which ones of those are limitations of using official statistics? If you just write your answers down in the chat box. Okay, so we're getting some A and B, C, DC, B, C, ACD, ACDC, what? ABC, ACDC, completely something different. Okay, so let's look at the answer for this one. It was A, B, and C. They can be manipulated. Official statistics are often manipulated, usually for political purposes. The definitions can change over time. An example of this is the definition of poverty that can change over time, and they may lack validity. If we think about crime statistics, often sort of like there are certain groups who are underrepresented or overrepresented, and there's also a dark figure of crime as well. Let's move on to question 2. Which of the following are limitations of using closed questionnaires? A, they lack reliability. B, they lack validity. C, they're time consuming to conduct. Or D, the imposition effect. So let's look at our... What is the difference between reliability and validity? Reliability is the ability to replicate research and get similar results. Validity is whether or not it accurately measures what it's supposed to measure. Gives us a true picture of what we're investigating. Which of the following limitations? Okay, so we're getting some B, D, B, A, B, D, B and D, B, B, okay. 5 A's. B and C, B and D. I'm hoping your key's stuck there. All right. Okay, let's have a look at the answer. Yeah, closed questionnaires tend to lack validity because of D, the imposition effect, because the imposition effect is where the researcher chooses the potential responses that a respondent can give. So they give them a certain list of responses. Question number 3. Which of the following are limitations of using group interviews? A, they're time consuming to conduct. B, the influence of other respondents. C, a lack of validity. And D, they only produce quantitative data. Okay, A, B, 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 C, B, C. Lots of people are picking B. Okay, A, B, 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 A, B, D, A and C, B, C. Okay, let's look at the answers. It's B and C. It's the influence of other respondents. This could be either people not taking part because of the influence of somebody who is more dominant in the group or because of fear of reprisal, particularly in the case of looking at things like anti-school subcultures. And C is a lack of validity. Because of the influence of other respondents, people may just conform to the group's responses and not give their true response. They're not very time consuming to conduct. They can be done quite quickly, and you can get both qualitative and quantitative data from them. Question number 4.
Just seeing a question in the chat thing about why is it not time consuming? If you compare it with doing individual interviews where you're interviewing one person at a time, obviously if you've got a group, it's quicker. So, I mean, all of these things are relative, but it's not as time consuming as some alternatives.
Yeah. You're collecting a lot of data in a short space of time with a group interview. Okay, so which of the following limitations which of the following are limitations of using self-completion questionnaires? Is it A, misunderstanding questions, B, the cost of distribution, C, the response rate, or D, distributing to respondents? So some people have got A, B, D, C, AC, A, AC. And the others, A, B, C, D. Some people think it's all 4. Okay, can we see the answers? It is A, misunderstanding questions. People may potentially misunderstand the question, and because there is no researcher there to explain it to them, this could be a problem. And response rate. If a self-completion questionnaire is given to somebody to take away, they're less likely to return it if than if there was somebody there to collect it off them. So the response rates tend to be lower on self-completion questionnaires. Question number 5. Which of the following are limitations of using field experiments? Is it A, the cost, B, the control over variables, C, the lack of validity, or D, deception? Okay, so some people are saying cost, control over variables, B and C, lack of validity, A, C, B, B, D, D, C, B. Okay, quite a few responses there. Let's have a look at the answers, please. It was A, B, and D. The cost, obviously, because you need to use specialist recording equipment outside of a lab experiment, so therefore it can be more costly. Control over variables. You can't control the extraneous variables in a field experiment, so people could react based on an extraneous variable that haven't controlled. And D, deception. Often in field experiments, people are being observed in a natural environment, and they may not be aware that they're taking part in an experiment. Okay, so I shall hand you back to Duncan. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just noticing a couple of questions that came up just on that last one about the validity. Obviously, with the field experiment, it's being done in the natural, in its natural sort of environment, so it's more valid than a lab experiment and more valid than some other options. It might well be that there are other methods that are more valid soon. And then a couple of people about asking the deception, who would they be lying to? If you take a field experiment like Rosenthal and Jacobson with the self-fulfilling prophecy, obviously the teachers had to be deceived, had to believe that the data they were given was about the pupils being spurters or not, had to be true. They had to believe that was true for the experiment to work. So in order to manage those variables. Okay, some really good answers from you through there. And I hope some areas for you to think about and to look at as well. We've got these coming up as a weekly spot, Wednesday at 3 o'clock. So I hope you'll join us again on future ones. And I think I'd have to double check what's next week, but it'll be on there. I think it might be. Is it families? I was thinking it's families as well. Yeah, we're also doing it during half term as well. So the Wednesday, 3 o'clock for the next several weeks. So hopefully you'll join us for some more. And lots of people saying thank you and thank you too.
Thanks.
Okay. See you soon.
We are doing one on crime at some point.
Well, yeah.